Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to bring clarity to confusion and turn frustrating challenges into strategic pathways. Today, we are tackling a linguistic problem that, honestly, almost every serious English learner faces. It's one that's truly irritating and persistent. You probably know the feeling all too well. You're prepping for a meeting, maybe, or you finally sit down to watch that fast-paced English movie you've been wanting to see, or perhaps a complicated documentary. You can read the script, subtitles or the transcript perfectly fine. You absolutely know the vocabulary. Your reading comprehension, excellent. But the moment you turn off the text, the moment you rely solely on your ears, especially when the dialogue gets quick or really casual, the words just seem to blur together. They just dissolve into this indistinguishable high-speed stream of sound. You know the words on the page, but you just don't recognize the sounds when you hear them. Why?
That gap right there, that chasm between written knowledge and auditory recognition, that's exactly what we're diving into today. It's that feeling when native speech sounds almost like a secret code you haven't quite cracked yet. But the sources you shared, particularly the ones detailing the influent research, they offer a really clear research-backed strategy to bridge this exact gap. It's a concept they call easy to hard training.
Easy to hard training. Oh.
Yeah. So our mission today is pretty comprehensive. We want to go beyond just, simple tips and tricks. We're going to unpack the underlying science, specifically the cognitive, the linguistic reasons why fast speech is so tricky to understand. And then, crucially, we'll connect those findings directly to an actionable, multi-phase training framework. We really want to show you why just struggling constantly against difficult content is, often inefficient, and how adopting a more gradual strategic pace is actually the key to mastering true auditory processing.
Right, moving from just reading comprehension to that sort of instantaneous listening comprehension.
Exactly, that immediate understanding.
So we're focusing purely on the auditory training side of things today. How you can physically train your ears and maybe more importantly, your brain's processing speed to move toward that ultimate goal, which isn't just understanding English, but having that almost effortless recognition that makes you feel like a native listener.
That's the goal, that feeling of effortlessness.
Okay, let's really unpack this core issue in more detail, because the source material highlights this really peculiar problem. You know the words when they're written down, but you fail to recognize them when they're spoken. And like you said, many people assume, I just need more vocabulary. But that's clearly not the issue for someone who reads the script and understands everything already.
Right. And what's fascinating here and what the researchers really emphasize is that this is almost never a vocabulary deficit. It's a core auditory processing or recognition deficit.
Okay, auditory processing deficit.
Yeah, and we should probably spend a moment defining what that actually means, because it really is the root cause of all that frustration we talked about. So, auditory processing. You can think of it as the sound-to-meaning mapping system in your brain. It's incredibly fast. When sound waves hit your ear, your brain performs an astonishing number of steps in, like fractions of a second, mere milliseconds.
Wow.
It has to filter out background noise, first of all. Then it has to segment the continuous stream of sound, break it down into phonemes.
Phones, those are the smallest sound units, right?
Like
B in bat versus C in cat.
Precisely. The smallest units that actually change the meaning. And then it has to match those sequences of phonemes to the word templates you have stored in your memory, your internal dictionary.
That sounds incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And you're saying that whole chain of events has to happen almost instantly, in real time, as you're listening.
Exactly. And that's where the system can get overloaded. If the input speed increases significantly, or if the quality of the sound degrades, maybe there's background noise or the speaker isn't clear, the whole system can start to break down.
Okay.
And when native speakers talk quickly, which, let's be honest, they do naturally all the time, they don't carefully articulate every single word clearly and distinctly like you might hear in, say, a language learning audio track.
No, definitely not. It's much messier.
Much messier. Instead, they engage in things linguists call co-articulation, elision, and vowel reduction. These are the natural shortcuts of speech.
Okay, co-articulation, elision, vowel reduction. Those sound technical, but can you give us some concrete examples? Because that feels like the crucial barrier you hit when watching a movie or listening to fast conversation.
Absolutely. Let's take vowel reduction. This is a huge one. In rapid speech, vowels in unstressed syllables often get reduced to a neutral, sort of mumbled sound, schwa sound, think of.
The schwa. Schwa.
So, for example, the word for, F-O-R. When spoken quickly in a sentence like, this is for you, it often sounds like fur. Or even just fur, this is for you.
Hmm. Oh, okay. I hear that.
Now, if you learned the word for as this distinct, fully articulated sound, your auditory processing system really struggles to match that quick, mumbled fur sound to that clean memory template you have for FOR.
It doesn't match up easily.
It doesn't. Then there's elision. That's where sounds are dropped entirely to make speech faster and smoother. The classic examples are going to becoming gonna.
Right, goner.
Or want to becoming wanna.
Wanna. Yeah.
Or think about questions. If a speaker asks, did you see it? In fast speech, that very often comes out sounding like, did you see it? Or even jeet, like jeet it.
Oh, yeah. Did ya?
So the sound template your brain might be looking for is did, followed by you. But the input it's receiving is did ya. That mismatch causes a processing delay. The brain stalls for a fraction of a second trying to figure it out.
Okay, so if your brain is constantly hitting these little stalls because it's getting this compressed, kind of messy audio data, it just falls further and further behind the speaker. It's not that you don't have the capacity to understand, it's more like an efficiency problem. Your brain just lacks those crucial milliseconds needed to parse the fast, reduced sounds and successfully match them up with the words you actually do know.
Precisely. It's an efficiency bottleneck. We could think of it like, imagine you have a super high-resolution picture stored in your memory. That's the clean English word you learned. But the signal coming in the spoken audio is like a really compressed, slightly pixelated version of that picture.
There.
Your system is designed to recognize the high-res version instantly. But when it receives the compressed, distorted data, it takes just a bit longer to run the calculations and figure out, okay, gonna means going to. But by the time it makes that match, the speaker might already be 3 sentences down the road. You're constantly playing catch-up.
That makes so much sense. So, if you, the listener, have felt that overwhelming sensation of words just flying past you, way too fast to grasp, know that this frustration is incredibly common. It's scientifically explainable. And the fantastic news, really, is that the methodology outlined in the sources we're looking at today directly addresses this efficiency problem. It offers a practical, non-overwhelming solution, one that trains the speed and the resilience of your auditory system, rather than just demanding more, brute source exposure to stuff that's too hard.
Exactly. It's about training smarter, not just harder.
So we've established the problem. It's this auditory inefficiency, often caused by the speed and complexity of natural native speech. Now, the typical temptation for learners facing this is just keep watching those fast movies, keep listening to those difficult podcasts, believing that if they just struggle hard enough, eventually their brain will magically adapt and catch up.
Right. The no pain, no gain approach applied to listening.
Exactly. But the influent sources, drawing on research, suggest a far more effective, though maybe counterintuitive approach. This easy to hard training.
Yes, and this really raises an extremely important question about how we learn best, about the optimization of learning itself.
Right.
Why would deliberate, easier practice actually be better than just constantly tackling the hardest stuff?
Yeah, why does starting easy win?
To understand this, we really need to dive a bit deeper into the specific research that's referenced in the source material. It's quite telling. The study focused on training participants to perform a difficult skill. In this case, it was a fine-grained auditory discrimination task, basically, hearing subtle differences in sounds. Pretty relevant to language learning.
Yep.
The researchers designed 3 levels of difficulty for this sound task: an easy version, a normal or medium version, and a difficult version. And the whole experiment was set up to compare two fundamentally different learning philosophies, two different ways of training.
Okay, philosophy number one. Let's call it the brute force method, like we mentioned.
Right. This group was trained only on the difficult version of that auditory task, just the hard stuff right from the start.
This perfectly mirrors the language learner who says, I want to understand movies, so I'm only going to watch movies, even if I understand almost nothing right now.
Exactly. The underlying belief is maximum difficulty equals maximum gain. Just throw yourself in the deep end.
Okay, what was the second group?
The second group followed the gradual increase philosophy, the easy to hard framework. They dedicated significant training time first to the easy and the normal versions of the task. They deliberately focused on mastering the fundamentals, building up their skill and efficiency at the lower difficulty levels. Only after they had solidified their abilities on the easier versions were they then exposed to the final difficult version of the task.
Okay, so the crucial difference here is how they spent their training time. The difficult task itself, the final test, was the exact same for both groups.
Identical. Group 1, the brute force group, actually got more total practice time on the difficult task itself. Group 2 spent a good chunk of their time on the easier iterations, building that foundation.
So the researchers then measured which group actually performed better on that final maximum difficulty assessment. What did they find?
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. This is the core finding that justifies this whole deep dive approach. Despite Group 2 having considerably less direct practice time on the difficult task itself, they performed significantly better on the final difficult task than Group 1.
They practiced the hard part less, but did better on it.
Significantly better.
That feels totally counterintuitive. Why?
Absolutely.
If you want to get good at the difficult task, shouldn't you just practice the difficult task as much as possible? How did doing the easy stuff give Group 2 an edge?
It's a great question, and if we connect this finding to the bigger picture, particularly principles from neuroscience and learning science, the answer seems to lie in neural efficiency and pathway optimization.
Neural efficiency.
Think about Group 1, the brute force group. When they were constantly training at maximum difficulty, their brains were likely under persistent cognitive overload, just constantly stressed.
Right, struggling all the time.
Exactly. They were trying to process the really challenging input while simultaneously trying to build the foundational neural pathways needed for recognizing those subtle sound differences in the first place. That high stress, high failure environment actually leads to inefficient, maybe even fractured, and definitely slow formation of those crucial brain pathways.
It's like trying to build a highway during rush hour with constant accidents.
That's a great analogy. Now, contrast that with Group 2, the gradual increase group. They were allowed to start easy. When the task was simpler, the cognitive load was low. Their brains weren't overloaded. This allowed their brains to focus resources almost entirely on building highly efficient, really robust, and clean neural pathways for that sound-to-meaning matching. They were laying down smooth, clear highway lanes first, without the stress of peak traffic. Ah, okay. So the easy steps weren't just about learning to recognize easy sounds. They were more like calibration exercises for the brain, creating these really frictionless pathways.
Precisely. They were establishing the underlying software architecture, if you will, without simultaneously dealing with a processing crisis.
So when Group 2 finally did encounter the difficult task, they weren't trying to build the highway and manage the crazy traffic at the same time.
Exactly. They just had to apply their already optimized pathways to the more challenging input. And those pathways functioned faster and more reliably, even under the pressure of the difficult task.
That makes perfect sense. It's about building the infrastructure first.
It really is. And this learning principle seems to be quite universal. If you're finding something really difficult, instead of just continuing to bang your head against the wall at maximum difficulty, it's often far more effective to deliberately step back. Start with something easier that you can succeed at, master that, and then incrementally increase the challenge. You're training the foundational efficiency of your system first. And that foundational efficiency translates directly to better performance when things eventually get fast and complex, like in real conversations or movies.
That's the key insight from the research.
Wow. Okay, this research really validates the idea then. We need to gain control over the content, manage the difficulty, before we can really succeed at the hard stuff. We have to build success before we can achieve speed.
Build success to build speed. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so if the research clearly shows that starting easy is the way to go, the first phase of this easy to hard framework has to be about making listening content easy. Based on what we just discussed, this seems like the most critical stage for actually establishing those robust, efficient neural pathways we need. So how exactly do we execute phase one in practice? The source material suggests two really powerful, immediate levers of control we can use: controlling the speed and controlling the source of the audio itself.
Right. Let's start with speed control, because that's probably the most immediate and maybe the most impactful tool you have at your disposal right away. You absolutely must use tools, smartphone apps, computer programs like VLC Player, YouTube's playback settings, podcast players, anything that allows you to dictate the rate of the auditory input. You need to be in charge of the speed.
Okay, take control of the speed.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the goal speed? How slow should you go?
The goal here is to slow the audio down to a point where you achieve very high comprehension. Ideally, the sources suggest aiming for something like 95% understanding or higher. Now, for some listeners, that might mean slowing it down to maybe 75% of the normal speed, 0.75x. For others, if the content is particularly challenging or their current level is lower, it might need to be 50%, 0.5x, or even slower initially.
95% comprehension, that's quite high.
It is, but remember the goal of phase one. Build success. Build those clean pathways. You need to be understanding almost everything to allow your brain to do that calibration work effectively without overload.
Okay, but I have to raise a common concern here, something learners often worry about when you suggest slowing audio down. Doesn't slowing it down risk making it sound, I don't know, robotic or unnatural? Are we just creating a different kind of crutch by listening to speech that doesn't sound like real fast English?
That's a really key question, and it's a valid concern. But the answer, based on this framework, is no, provided you remember that this phase is temporary.
It's not the end goal.
Absolutely not. You are not slowing it down forever. You are slowing it down strategically to buy yourself crucial cognitive time, time that you currently lack when listening at full native speed. It's that extra processing time that allows you to build the efficiency we keep talking about.
Okay, cognitive time. What exactly does that extra time allow the brain to do?
Well, when you slow the audio down, you gain those precious extra milliseconds to perform several functions that your brain currently can't handle all at once at full speed. First, like we discussed before, you gain time to actually make out those reduced or co-articulated words. You hear gonna more slowly, more clearly, giving your brain a better chance to match that slightly messy sound pattern to the clean template of going to stored in your memory.
Okay, so better pattern matching for those tricky connected speech forms.
Exactly. Second, you gain time for contextual guessing. If you encounter a word you genuinely don't know or one you mishear, the slower pace allows your brain to keep processing the rest of the sentence, the surrounding words, to infer the meaning before the conversation just rushes past and leaves you lost.
Right, you have more time to use the context clues.
Precisely. And third, critically, if you're using a transcript alongside the audio, which is highly, highly recommended, especially in this initial phase that time buffer is essential, It allows you to seamlessly map the sound you are hearing directly onto the word you are seeing on the page. That simultaneous input, slow sound plus text, is incredibly powerful for training that sound-to-word recognition pathway. That's the foundational skill training we absolutely need.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's look at that specific example provided in the source material again. We heard it earlier, but let's analyze it now through this lens of gaining cognitive time by slowing it down. The text was, I told my mom that I was going to win first place, and she just laughed at me. To be honest, she had no real reason to believe me because I wasn't a particularly great speller and I hadn't even placed in the previous year's contest. But for some reason, I was so sure of myself. So I said, okay, Mom.
Okay, so if you hear that at full natural speed, a phrase like, I was gonna win first place, gonna win, might just blur into one quick sound blob, hard to parse. But slowed down, maybe to 0.7x speed, the individual sounds within gonna become clearer, it stretches out slightly. That gives the brain the time it needs to register that reduced form, gonna, and successfully map it back to the meaning, going to.
Right.
Similarly, a complex phrase like hadn't even placed. At full speed, that can be a mouthful to process auditorily. Slowed down, it becomes much easier to segment the individual words hadn't even placed. You're successfully processing it, which builds confidence and reinforces those correct recognition pathways, rather than just causing frustration and reinforcing failure.
So the goal of phase one, then, is essentially achieving total success with the chosen material at whatever reduced speed is necessary. You need to be able to listen and hit that near-perfect, maybe 95% recognition and comprehension.
Yes. Once you can confidently understand that material at, say, 75% speed, you've successfully built that initial foundation. You've laid down the smooth highway lanes.
Okay, speed control is lever number one. What's the second lever for making things easy in phase one?
The second critical element is to control the source material itself. Don't just slow down randomly chosen, super complex audio. You need to be strategic about what you choose to listen to in this phase.
So don't try to slow down like an action movie soundtrack with explosions and overlapping dialogue right at the start.
Exactly. Don't overwhelm your training system with unnecessary complexity on top of the speed challenge. The sources strongly advise choosing media that is inherently easier to understand to begin with. So, start with content that features speakers who articulate relatively clearly. Perhaps they have a more standard or neutral accent that's easier for you initially. Choose speakers who are speaking in a structured way.
Like interviews, maybe.
Yeah.
Or educational content, lectures.
Perfect examples. Podcasts like this one, interviews, presentations, audiobooks. Read clearly. These are often much better starting points than, say, jumping straight into difficult genres like action movies or fast-talking comedies.
Why are movies so much harder, generally?
Well, movies often have multiple factors increasing the difficulty simultaneously. Lots of overlapping dialogue, significant background noise or music, complex sound mixing that can bury the speech, and crucially, a huge variety of accents, dialects, and very natural, often mumbled, speaking styles.
Okay.
So the advice is start small, start controlled, choose easier content, and control the speed. Build robust confidence and success first. This is how you ensure those neural pathways you're building are clean, efficient, and ready for the next stage.
Okay, so phase one is all about making it easy, controlling the speed and the source, achieving that high comprehension to build the foundational neural efficiency. But, and this is a big but, efficiency doesn't automatically equal speed at handling difficult content. If you just stay comfortable forever, only listening to slow, clearly articulated stuff, well, your listening skills are going to plateau, right?
Absolutely. You'll become fantastic at understanding slow, clear English, but you'll never bridge that gap to understanding fast, natural, messy, native speech.
So the easy to hard method crucially includes the too hard part. You have to move on.
You absolutely have to. This is the strategic pivot point. Phase 2 is where we leverage that solid foundation we just built in phase 1 and start deliberately challenging ourselves. So once you can understand your chosen content completely at a reduced speed, maybe that 0.75x, or perhaps you've even mastered understanding that easier content at its normal 1.0x speed, now you must start pushing past that comfort zone.
And how do we do that? What's method A for increasing the difficulty?
Method A is the most direct. Start speeding it up, gradually increase the playback speed.
Okay, but based on the research, we shouldn't just jump from easy to super fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be gradual.
Extremely gradual. That's the key difference between the strategic training and the ineffective brute force method. You shouldn't jump from, say, 75% speed straight to 125% speed. That would likely just recreate the old frustration. Instead, the sources recommend very small incremental increases. Think maybe 5% or 10% increments at a time.
So if I'm comfortable understanding everything at 0.75x speed,
Try bumping it up to 0.80x. Listen for a while. Can you still understand almost everything? Is it manageable? If yes, great, stick with that for a bit, or maybe try 0.85x.
okay.
If you find that 0.85x is suddenly too difficult, you're getting lost, then you've gone a step too far. Back it down slightly, maybe to 0.80x or 0.82x. This fine-tuning is absolutely crucial.
So you're constantly searching for this specific zone, this edge. The sources called it the uncomfortable sweet spot, I think. What exactly does that feel like? How do you know you're in it?
That's a great term for it, the uncomfortable sweet spot. It's the point where you must still be able to understand the core message, the main ideas of the content. You shouldn't be completely lost or overwhelmed.
Okay, still understanding.
Yes, comprehension is still the priority. But at the same time, you should feel a slight cognitive effort is required to keep up. It shouldn't feel totally easy and relaxed anymore. You should feel like your brain is working a little harder, processing just a bit faster to stay with the speaker. That feeling of operating right at the edge of your current processing capacity, that is the sweet spot. Ah, okay. Not lost, but definitely working.
Exactly. Because that's the zone where your brain is being actively stimulated to optimize and accelerate those auditory recognition pathways you built in phase 1. It's like adding just a little more weight in resistance training, enough to challenge the muscle and force adaptation, but not so much that you fail completely.
You're basically training the brain to synthesize information faster and faster, incrementally, until the pace that previously felt overwhelming starts to feel, well, routine.
Precisely. You're systematically increasing its processing speed. Okay, to highlight this strategic challenge, let's revisit that other example from the source material, the one that was sped up. Listen again, and notice how much quicker you have to process those reduced forms and connected speech. Hey, think about, imagine you're going to a party, okay? And you go to a party and you're meeting some new people you've never met before. And at that party, you get a certain feeling off each person you're connecting with. You go, okay, over here's a woman who's like very gregarious and outgoing and fun-loving. And, oh, yeah, I'd love to connect with her. She seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, hearing it at that quicker pace really forces your brain into instantaneous recognition of forms like you're gonna be coming, you're gonna, or meeting some new people, running together. And this is exactly where the efficiency you built in phase 1 pays off massively. If you tried listening at that pace before doing phase 1, the experience would likely be pure frustration, just a blur of sound. But after phase 1, after building that foundation at slower speeds, listening at the slightly faster pace becomes a productive challenge. It pushes your processing speed forward without causing overload.
Makes sense. Okay, so method A is gradually increasing the speed. But we also talked about controlling the source in phase 1. Does that apply here too? Is there a method B for increasing difficulty?
Yes, absolutely. Just increasing speed isn't enough for robust, real-world listening skills. Method B is about strategically diversifying your input.
Diversifying input, meaning?
Meaning, don't just keep listening to the same person sped up faster and faster. If you only train your ears on one specific voice, even at increasing speeds, you'll get really good at understanding that one person.
Ah, you optimize just for their specific way of speaking.
Exactly. You optimize for their particular accent, their pitch range, their rhythm, their common speech patterns, their vocal tone. That's helpful, but it won't necessarily transfer well when you suddenly try to understand someone else from a different background with a different accent or speaking style.
Which is the reality of using English in the world. You talk to lots of different people.
Precisely. So, to truly generalize your listening recognition skill, to become fluent and comfortable listening to someone from New York or London or Sydney or Lagos or Mumbai, you absolutely must introduce acoustic variety into your training in phase 2. This means actively seeking out content featuring different people with different speaking styles.
Okay, so listen to podcasts with different hosts, watch interviews with people from various regions, maybe try different news readers.
All excellent ideas. Listen to varied accents, American, British, Australian, Indian, etc. Listen to diverse tones, high-pitched, low-pitched voices. Pay attention to different levels of articulation. Some people speak very clearly, others mumble more. The goal is to ensure your brain becomes flexible. It needs to learn to recognize the underlying word, like going to, regardless of whether the sound arriving at your ear is packaged as a clear going to or reduced gonna, or a slightly different going to, depending on the speaker's accent and speed.
You're making sure your internal auditory map becomes robust enough to handle the sheer diversity and complexity of real-world English.
That's the idea, robustness and flexibility.
Okay, so phase 2 is this combination, incrementally increasing the speed to find that uncomfortable sweet spot, and simultaneously diversifying the input by listening to many different speakers and styles. And this dual approach is what prepares you for the ultimate difficult listening task for many learners. Understanding movies without relying on subtitles. That's kind of the final frontier, isn't it?
It often is, yes. That's frequently the big goal. So once you feel relatively comfortable understanding diverse content, maybe different podcasts, interviews, maybe even some documentaries at a slightly accelerated speed, perhaps 1.1x or 1.2x normal speed, then you're likely ready to transition that highly trained skill set to the most complex auditory environment. Movies. Start trying to watch movies without any subtitles.
Take the plunge.
Take the plunge, but strategically.
Okay, but what if?
Yeah.
What if, even after all this careful, strategic phase 1 and phase 2 training, you turn on a movie, turn off the subtitles, and it's still just too overwhelming? Which, let's face it, is a real possibility given how fast and complex film dialogue and sound design can be.
It absolutely is a possibility, and the sources provide a crucial soft landing strategy for exactly this scenario. The key is, don't panic and immediately succumb to the old habit of just turning the subtitles straight back on.
Because that just retreats to the old, less efficient pathway.
Exactly. It undoes the training benefit. Instead, leverage the tool set you've already been using. Slightly slow down the movie's playback speed.
Ah, use the speed control on the movie itself.
Yes. Many modern streaming services or media players, like VLC again, allow for subtle speed adjustments. Try reducing it by just 5% to 0.95x, or maybe 10% to 0.9x.
Just a small adjustment.
Often that slight decrease is just enough to give your newly optimized auditory pathways the little bit of extra processing buffer they need to successfully handle the complex sound mixture of the film, the fast dialogue, the music, the sound effects, while still demanding significant speed and recognition skill from you.
So you're still challenging yourself, but you're making it achievable.
Precisely. And then, once your ears adjust and you find recognition becomes seamless at that slightly reduced pace, say 0.9x, you then progress back towards watching the movie at its normal 1.0x speed.
So the easy to hard gradient, that gradual increase, is maintained right up to the very end, right up to achieving that final native level comprehension goal.
That's the principle. Consistent, strategic, gradual challenge based on a solid foundation. Hashtag tech outro. So, when we pull it all together, we've basically connected a fundamental finding in learning research, the idea that mastering easier levels first leads to superior performance on hard levels directly to very practical, step by step language acquisition strategies. Improving your listening comprehension, it turns out, is largely about exercising strategic control over those two main levers we identified: the complexity of the content you listen to and the speed at which you process it.
Yeah.
It really is about building that robust foundation in an easier setting before you tackle the high-stress, high-speed challenges.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, practically speaking? It means that frustrating gap between reading English and actually understanding spoken English. It isn't some permanent, insurmountable obstacle. It's really a challenge that can be overcome, not by sheer brute force or endless frustration, but by applying a smart strategy. Don't waste time struggling where you could be strategically succeeding. Take back control of the pace. Choose your materials wisely in the beginning. Build up your auditory efficiency step by step, and then push yourself incrementally faster and into more diverse territory.
Well said. And maybe this raises a final, broader question for you to consider as you go forth and start strategizing your own listening practice using this easy to hard framework. If this approach, this deliberate strategy of sometimes stepping back to an easier level to build optimal neural efficiency first is so effective for developing auditory skills, where else? Where else in your life, or perhaps in your broader learning process for English or other skills, could you potentially benefit from taking a similar strategic step back, mastering the basics before tackling the final complex challenge ahead?
That's a great thought to end on. Where else can starting easy help you conquer the hard? Go forth and strategize.